We are back on MorningLine. Final segment this morning. District Attorney General Glenn Funk is joining us. We've taken a few phone calls. We're talking about several cases, talking about what the legislature's done. This is interesting to me. I hadn't realized some of these statistics. You talk about how your focus, as you've been district attorney, is on, focusing on violent crime and not locking up people for lesser crimes that maybe don't pose a risk to the public, which I think makes sense when you think about it, okay? That doesn't mean you're not finding a way to deal with these other individuals, but because of that, you're reserving it for violent offenders. So with that policy, you've lowered the daily populations of locally incarcerated inmates from about 3,151 per day. That was back in 2013, okay, almost 10 years ago, to almost about half, 1,535 per day. The sheriff has said as much. I mean, he doesn't have as many people he's locked up. And this results in a savings of about $155,000 a day, millions on a yearly basis?
Yeah, over $50 million a year we're saving on incarceration costs.
So, for instance, who you're no longer, give me an example of the type of folks and crimes you're no longer locking up.
Okay. In 2013, there were 18,000 inmate days in jail just for people driving on a revoked license. Right, that number now is probably less than 30 days in jail. Right, so boom, they're 50 people a day not in jail just for that. Marijuana offenses were over 5,000 inmate days in jail just for marijuana cases in 2013. Well, now that's, if it's not zero, it's real close to zero, because sometimes like an old warrant gets arrest and they don't make bond, or a probation violation. So, but it's probably less than 10 in a given year now. But mental health cases too. The behavioral care center is really a game changer, and we're the only city in the country that has this. Though I hosted a group of the American Prosecutors Association, all the big cities in the country. We had about 31, 32 DAs from around the country in town, and we were able to talk Detroit, Chicago, Manhattan, Oakland, right? All prosecutors from around the country were here in Nashville having a meeting, and we talked specifically about some of the things that Nashville has going on, and this was one of them. And it's such a great program that the sheriff talked about, that I talked about, to where they're building a new jail in both Kansas City and in the Bronx, and both of those DAs went back to say, I've got to go talk to my sheriff about, let's do this in our town too. But what we're doing there is, every night, if someone is held in jail unable to make a bond for whatever reason, which there aren't many of those in the misdemeanors, but if it's in the morning at 6:30 in the morning, a district attorney arrives and goes over who is still in jail, okay, and hasn't made their bond yet. If the case is appropriate for it, and if there is some sort of mental health flag, then she approves that case to be diverted if the mental health co-op says that they should be sent to the behavioral care center, and if the person charged is willing to do that. What happens then is, if they're all in agreement, then they go to the behavioral care center. They're treated for between 5 and 30 days. Average stay is probably 8, 9 days.
Is that the facility that's attached to the jail?
It's next door to the jail.
Yeah, it's right there, right.
It's next door to the jail. Sure. At the end of that time, then their case is dismissed, essentially nollied, expunged, and they leave the facility. They've had a social worker that helps them find housing, so they're not just released to the streets. They have housing, they have 30 days of meds in their pocket, and they've got a 30, 60, and 90-day comeback date for more support from the mental health co-op. I'll give you an example of how that worked. Okay. We opened roughly this time last year. In early December, I got a call from a lawyer who said that she had a former student, because she's a school teacher as well as a lawyer, who just got arrested. Apparently this young woman was the first person in her family to go to college. She was in her first semester in college at one of the universities in Jackson, Tennessee. And because of COVID, she was home starting at Thanksgiving for the rest of the holidays and took her exams online. But she didn't get along with her mom's new boyfriend. At some point, an argument ensues, and she goes to the kitchen, got a kitchen knife out, and chased him around the apartment. He then got out into the yard. She chased him out in the yard. Somebody called the police. She came. She got arrested for 5 charges, the most serious of which was aggravated assault. Now, aggravated assault carries 3 to 15 years.
Yeah,
it's assaulting somebody with a deadly weapon.
Well, she was going after him with a knife.
Right. Well, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. Well, who grabs a kitchen knife and chases mom's boyfriend around? So I called the DA that does the screening for this. I said, can we get her screened? And so the district attorney called the victim in the case. Would you be okay if she wasn't prosecuted in the criminal justice system, but was instead treated for mental health issues? She talked to the officers, and they agreed, as well as the victim agreed. When the woman was screened, yes, she had a mental health diagnosis. All right. Any other jurisdiction in the country, what would have happened is she would have sat in jail for probably 30 days to 6 months before taking a plea deal where she would have gotten probation. She'd been on probation. She then would have violated the probation because she was off her meds or whatever. It would have started a cycle of in and out of the jail, and she'd have been a convicted felon, all kinds of limitations on her life. Instead, we were able to divert her with the support of the victim, the support of the police, the support of the mental health co-op, divert her out of the jail, housed in the behavioral care center. She was given a new diagnosis, fresh medication, stabilized on her meds. She was released after 8 days to housing that was not with that same group, not with her mom's boyfriend anymore. And she was able to have some follow-up from the mental health co-op in Jackson. She was able to go back to school for a second semester, and now she's a sophomore. Right. Instead of having...
well, you would have ruined her life.
For sure. And we would have spent tons of money on failed efforts to correct the behavior, whereas instead, because Nashville has done this, I mean, our city government, our council and our mayors funded this, right? Our sheriff, who's visionary, built this institution, and then we worked together to find a way to properly address people's needs in a way that will drive down our incarceration rate on the cases where an alternative is a better resolution for the behavior that was charged.
You know, and I think anyone who listens to that will say, you know, that makes perfect sense. And I guess the emphasis point you want to make is that you're not cutting slack to anyone that you feel is going to truly be a threat to society and violent offenders. Just to reemphasize, it's not like, okay, we're going to go easy on them. An example of a case that you would not, you know, do something like that would be obviously a homicide or something like that.
Right. If somebody were to go into McDonald's this afternoon and shoot up the McDonald's, well, yeah, that's where our resources are supposed to go. The criminal law is about incapacitation. We have to lock up some folks if they're a real danger to us. It's about rehabilitation, and it's about deterrence. Now, there is some under the Tennessee Code that talks about retribution, i.e. revenge, but really it's about incapacitation for the folks that are really dangerous. It's about rehabilitating people that can be rehabilitated, and it's about having a deterrence both for that individual not to continue to commit crime and for all of us to realize, hey, you know what, you're going to get prosecuted if you do a major theft, a burglary, a robbery, a killing, a shooting. We've actually, you know, one of the things that I think that we're all doing, we've seen an increase in shootings, right? The legislature keeps making it easier and easier for people to have weapons, carry weapons, have it with them all the time. You don't even have to be licensed now to have a weapon when you're walking around in public. You don't have to have a license to have a gun in your car.
And more guns being stolen.
More guns are being stolen from cars. It is dangerous, but one of the things that Chief Drake has done, which is exciting, is he has re-centralized the homicide unit. Back in the early 2000s, Chief Surpass decentralized. A lot of communities tried a decentralized method. Our solve rate was down. Our conviction rate was down. Now Chief Drake has re-centralized the homicide unit. They are doing fantastic work. I've assigned 7 prosecutors to work with that team, Deputy District Attorney Roger Moore, and then every team leader. We've got it where at the time that the first report of the homicide happens, then a district attorney is assigned to it that can work with the homicide unit to be able to make sure that the investigation, that we can participate in advising during the investigation stages, and that they get for us the proof that we're going to need to achieve the conviction. It's fantastic. Our homicide rate was on pace to be the highest ever, and it still might be the highest ever in 2021. But I just got a report from the homicide unit 2 weeks ago that over the last 6 months, the numbers are actually falling to where we might not be quite as severe of a jump.
And you attribute that to?
I attribute that to the efforts that Chief Drake's doing to make sure that we find people who are so dangerous, who don't appreciate the sanctity of human life, who are willing to do these types of behaviors, to finding those folks and getting them off the streets. I attribute it to the work that my office is doing to try to work hand in hand with the police department on those homicides. That said, we've still got an issue where, you know, with the proliferation of guns, we're going to be fighting this for a long time, all right? But that's important. The chief then centralized carjackings, and we've seen the carjacking rate drop because they've solved a lot of those, and there are small groups of people that are doing carjackings
over and over again. It has gone down. We haven't had as many news stories on that.
And by getting that handful of people off the streets and solving those crimes, we're making the whole city safer because there are fewer carjackings.
You know, I'm just curious, we have to wrap it up now, and gosh, I sure hope you come back and join us again on a more regular basis. So much to talk about. Just curious, on any given, as we sit here right now, how many active cases does the district attorney's office, and I know you don't have the specific number in Davidson County, have on the books that it's working? I mean, could be cases from several years back that are still pending. Are we talking thousands?
We've probably got, you know, if we were to take a snapshot right now at the criminal courts clerk's office, there's probably 60,000 open warrants.
Wow.
Of those, there are probably 6,000 of those are felonies. And of those felonies, probably 4,500 of them are violent felonies. So we have 70 assistant district attorneys. We're working really hard. In my opinion, I'll put the work of this office up against anybody in the country, and we're making a difference because Nashville, statistics-wise, is still the safest city of all the major cities in the country, and the justice system is working.
The city keeps growing too.
Yeah.
General, thank you.
Sure.
For coming on. It's a pleasure. We'll talk again. Take a break. Be back with a programming note right after this.